think it also helps the outsider, because really, I don't want the birthing mom assessing her progress.
Right.
That's such a masculine measurement that, like, we can't measure this mystery. Stop trying to measure it within yourself, because that you're immediately pulling yourself out.
Holy Wild Birth is a podcast embracing the reclamation of giving birth rooted in God's original design, undisturbed.
Here, we share homebirth stories highlighting God's presence as the great midwife, as well as conversations about all aspects of a holistic, spirit-led childbearing year, from the perspectives of myself, traditional midwife Lauren Hall, of Rooted in Eden Private Membership Association,
and me, holistic birthkeeper and photographer Brooke Collier of Sister Birth. Together, we are co-founders and facilitators of Hearthmother Journey, where we are raising up the next generation of holy wild birthkeepers.
To choose a holy wild birth journey is to consecrate all of your decisions unto the Lord and reclaim creation unadulterated by centuries of human attempts to control and improve upon what God has called good.
Please remember that birth is not a medical event, but a natural process, and we are not your care providers, so this should not be taken as medical advice.
Hello, Holy Wild Birth listeners. Lauren here again. I'm coming to you solo right now just to give you a little context for the episode you're about to hear. So this is again a replay from our season 1, and it goes beautifully with the episode we dropped earlier this week. This is one we felt was worth bringing back around, especially for those of you who might be newer listeners or who could use a fresh reminder of these truths. So this episode is called Mystery Can't Be Measured. And in it, Brooke and I talk about labor patterns and how we assess progress in birth, and why the way we've been taught to measure labor, contractions every 5 minutes lasting 1 minute for exactly 1 hour, and cervical dilation by centimeter, that often falls so short of capturing what's actually happening within each individual woman's body and her birth experience. In this episode, we reference Sharon's birth story pretty heavily. So if you haven't already listened to that episode, I'd encourage you to stop, go back, and start there first. You'll get so much more out of this discussion if you've heard her story. What I love about this episode is that it really challenges both birth workers and birthing mothers to approach labor with more humility, more attunement, and less of that need to control or quantify everything. Birth is a mystery, and it's deeply individual. And when we try to force it into our neat, nice little boxes or patterns, we often end up causing much more harm than good. So whether you're an expectant mama trying to figure out when to call your midwife, or a birth worker learning to trust the process, or just someone who's fascinated by the design of birth, this conversation is for you. And if you're feeling that pull towards serving women in this capacity, whether as a midwife, doula, birthkeeper, or you want to grow in this knowledge, I want to invite you to check out Hearthmother Journey. Not only do we teach all about the mystery of birth and its immeasurability, it is our year-long birthkeeper training, and it's a discipleship program. We're about to open up enrollment for the 5th cohort starting March 31st, 2026. So you can find the link in the show notes to join our first to know list and get all of the details. You can find out when we're having our open house and how to make sure you get through those doors when they open. All right, friends. I hope this episode challenges you, encourages you, and maybe even changes the way you think about birth. Enjoy!
Lauren, hi.
Hello.
I'm glad we get to talk again. Has it been a good week?
It has been. And I'm hanging out in Knoxville, Tennessee, about to have a skills workshop before we head out to Georgia for a short period of time and then into the unknown. I don't know where we're headed next until I come a little closer towards you soon.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
Yeah.
And I love your life. Your life on the road. I'm 30 weeks now, so final countdown.
Yeah.
Kind of, not really.
My brain went, and the final countdown.
It's starting to feel real. But so our last episode that we aired was a birth story with Sharon, who's a woman that you served like as her midwife. Mm-hmm. And we were thinking it might be fun to kind of use her story as a little bit of a jumping off point for talking about just labor patterns.
Yes.
And a phrase that you use, which is like, can you measure the mystery? And the answer is probably no. But let's dig into that. So we got to hear from Sharon, obviously, like through her own mouth, a lot about her birth story. But what are some of your reflections from the midwife perspective and how that illustrates this idea of labor progress?
Yeah. So I think my view of her birth, and that's why I really glad that we get to hear hers first, because I want her to hear hers, like it's her story.
Yeah.
But as like I have a story in that because I was there, right? So like my perspective, not even necessarily of her, but just of my experience attending her birth. And so I think it's very different for me. I really had a lot of peace moving in through her birth. Like I knew that her body was working, and a lot of the support for her was really encouraging her that her body was doing what it was supposed to be doing, that we weren't looking for it to be in a really like perfect 5-1-1 pattern right now, because baby was in this funky position. And I could feel that. I could feel under my hands that baby wasn't aligned really well. And really, at first I thought that baby was oblique, but later on, and through a lot of, things that we found in the labor palpating. And then I think at the final, I did one vaginal exam, if I'm remembering correctly. And just kind of assessing everything. I really think that it was her uterus that was oblique, not baby. And there was just that waiting to get the uterus really aligned well, and baby, all of her contractions were there to support moving baby and getting things into alignment. And there was this cultural pressure that wasn't actually present, but except for in her internal, like what she knows of birth and what her experience as a doula and her comparing that birth to her previous births. And, there's just that internal mom of like what we think it needs to be. Even with women who trust the process and know that they believe in natural birth, always had natural births, like we can still get caught up in a product of our culture. And so a lot of that birth for me attending it was just a reminding her, your body is doing what it's supposed to do. I don't want your body doing nice, long, steady contractions right now and pushing this baby into your pelvis in a wonky position. We'd end up with, an asynclitic head that's going to be harder to birth, where we could end up having to transfer because they get wedged into your pelvis and can't come out well. This is, if we kind of throw all of these other things at this birth and try and get it into this pattern that we have decided is supposed to be, I think that we'll be asking for trouble. And so, and I didn't necessarily say all of that to her, but it was just that that was going on in my internal brain.
Yeah.
No, we really need to, I'm asking, and I did say this to her, and it's something I say often now, is I am looking at this labor, not what should the body be doing by some definition, but what is it actually doing? Like, what is it doing? Why is it doing it that way? And what can we learn from that? What's it telling us? Like Wapio says, follow this labor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Gail Tully says something like, the uterus is telling its own story. Like, the uterus has got, what's this uterus doing? What's it need? And so it's going back to this, how do we support what is actually happening instead of trying to force it into what it should be doing, right? Like,
Yes.
and so stepping back and looking at what was going on in that labor, there was this kind of, I knew it wasn't prodromal because it was staying. Like, it was never a pattern of like, well, I guess towards the end it did, but like throughout this time, I was 2 hours away from her. Part 2 hours away because that was the setup that we had ended up finding. And I was kind of between two different moms at the time. And so that was where I was at. And when she called, there had been a small amount that it looked like there might be some mech. And, I was like, okay, well, we'll come in and check and, and just make sure that we can hear baby. Once I got there, her fluids were clear. Baby sounded perfect. Like, there was no real issue and there was no real reason for me to be there. But she had been, like, the labor it was staying present. It wasn't going anywhere, right? Like, she would go to rest and it was still there. And when she would get up and around, it was still there. It wasn't like steady or regular, but it was still, her body was still doing work. And so even though it didn't look like a lot of work from the outside perspective, I could see that it wasn't stopping and it was still trying to do something, and it was moving the baby. Like, that's really what it was doing. It was moving this baby and getting baby ready to be able to descend and come out. And so from my midwife perspective, it didn't need to be there, but I also knew that if I drove home that 2 hours, there was no way I would get back, because I just knew as soon as this labor like kicks over and baby gets aligned well, that baby's going to come right out really fast and I won't make it back. Like, I just knew that. And so I'm like just kind of holing up in her guest room. I spent the night there. We kind of went through the day the next day. And just kind of were like, I just need to be here. But it also made this dynamic of like, she felt like, well, the midwife's here, so we need to be in, I guess I can't say she felt, but like there was, just that pressure of like, the birth team is here. The stuff is set up. I am doing something, but my body's not doing it. And what's happening, and so I tried to just kind of keep pulling off into the guest room and keep like not making her feel like I needed her body to do something for me. And I remember she went for a walk and she went and got in the pool and she, and I just kind of, I think I took a nap because I hadn't gotten real sleep that night, because even though I had the guest bedroom, I knew that she was laboring. And so half of my brain's like awake and listening, and I could still hear her like doing her thing. And so I never really like slept well because it was just like, no, we're not having a baby yet. Okay, I'm not, like there was that space of one eye open kind of sleep. And so, so I was just kind of there and present. But when she finally like kicked over, it was really fast. And she just had this like, it just went into this pattern. And all of a sudden we were like, baby was lying and her doula came in and she had sent off her kids, like she shared, and they barely, like they got there right like seconds after baby was born. And so like, it just all kind of, it happened so fast. Like I that midwife antenna knew this is labor. This is working. This isn't a stall. This isn't prodromal. This is her body moving that baby. And we did some things, a lot of it was waiting and resting, but, we did the sideline, we did some rebozo work and some, techniques to kind of help turn that baby with the rebozo and kind of rotate them better with the fluid. And so, like it was more a process of, do I trust that the body is wise? And, and this is also aligned with, I had a lot of peace and like, I knew that we were okay. Like baby wasn't was sounding great. Baby was never struggling. And, I'm praying the whole time I'm there. I really believe that as a midwife, my role is an intercessor first and foremost, throughout the prenatal period and in the birth space. And so like, I'm in a mode of prayer. It doesn't, I have peace that we're fine. And so, and really she did when I would ask her those things. It was more of the like cultural internal pressures of like, but it's not a 5-1-1, but it's not a, this labor pattern. It's not getting longer, stronger, closer together. And we would just talk, we just kept going back to your body's doing what it needs to do. What's it doing? It's moving the baby. And she would have these contractions that would they would like build and baby would move and the contraction would stop. And I was like, it's doing what it's supposed to. It was moving the baby. You felt baby move a little bit and then it stopped because it's not trying to push the baby down. The uterus is wise and your body is wise and your baby is wise and it's doing, because there was this concern of like, it starts and then it stops. And it's like, but what's happening is you're saying, I'm hearing you say, it starts and the baby shifts a little and then it goes away. Why is it doing that? Because we want you to move. Like
the contractions had a different agenda. Than her brain did, right? Like, and that's so often, I think, the case with those so-called erratic or inconsistent labor patterns is that the contractions just have a different goal for a while than the goal that we think they should be having.
Right. It's not down and out, wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. It's not always that. It's not always just push baby out. Sometimes it's rotating baby. Sometimes it's, getting that flexion. That baby's head needs to flex against the cervix and it pushes down. And, in a beautiful textbook, perfect, all of those things kind of happen in this linear format, right? That like, okay, because that's how we have to explain things, right? Yes. Like if we try to explain labor in like we have to follow some way of explaining it, which is linear in a textbook way of like, okay, literally I'm writing the textbook. How do I have to explain it? Well, this happens and this happens and this happens. But if we get into the weeds of like, well, this can happen first technically, and then you can do that. And, like you end up creating this big like mind map web. And so we end up with a literal textbook description because that's how we have to read. That's how we have to learn. But that doesn't mean that's how it always happens.
Right.
It's
not. Like I teach, in my online birth course, like the stages of labor generally, like what you can expect physiologically and emotionally in each phase. But I definitely have to put a big fat disclaimer at the front end of all of that. Like I'm going to teach you like these generalities, but there's not a tiny number of times when it doesn't unfold just like this, in this order, in this pace. That's okay too. And especially like the more babies you've had, the less likely I find you are to conform to that pattern.
Yeah.
Like we were talking before we hit record about, you'll often hear 30-second contractions don't bring a baby out, but Lauren and I have both seen them bring a baby out.
My body has brought a baby out that way.
And you personally have done that. Yeah. So it's like useful. Like I'm like the Bradley method, for instance, I really appreciate like the emotional signposts it teaches and some good stuff there. And Wapio's like holistic stages of labor, I find really like beautiful and eloquent.
Beautiful.
And yet like we take it all with a grain of salt because bioindividuality is real. And you mentioned like fetal positioning as one reason that the body might not be behaving the way we expect by those models. But there's also like, I've sometimes seen the emotional component be huge. You probably have too.
Right.
I can remember one labor I was at where she was just kind of stuck and just frustrated. Like nothing was seeming to work in the way that one would expect. And finally she's like, I have to call my mom. And she actually had a bone to pick with her mom. She had to get on the phone with her mom and say some words and hear some words back. And then her labor took off.
Yeah.
You just never know.
That's beautiful that she was in tune enough to know that that's what she needed.
Yeah.
I've actually heard of another similar, she really needed her sister there. Her sister was out of town. And she didn't want to give birth without her sister present. And like her sister was like having to drive like 10 hours. to make it. And so they kind of had even done the, like, she probably won't make it, like when we, by the, the midst of, but we'll call and let her know. And like, she'd been in this great pattern. Everything was going perfectly. Sister had been driving and then like, it just kind of stopped and it was like a complete stall and like, what's happened? And is everything okay? And then like the sister walks in like 2 hours later and bam, she like has a baby within 30 minutes. Like, it was just like, okay. And now we're, cause she just needed, that was what she needed, was that presence of her sister.
Yeah.
Her body waited for it. It's, there's so much of that emotional aspect of whether it's, fears that need to be released or words that need to be had or the presence of the right people. Like, there's more to this beautiful mystery than just the physicality.
Because we're not machines.
We're not.
Shocking.
You're not a robot. I tell that to my clients all the time. You're not a robot. You don't have to fit this mold. Like,
yeah. Well, like that, the Friedman's curve, which if listeners who don't know that term, it's basically just, it's the name for that model of labor progression that says that one should dilate roughly 1 centimeter per hour. That still is used in hospitals.
I have like a visceral reaction when I use that term, but
yes.
My body's like, ah.
First of all, the data to back up that model was drawn from a relatively small pool of, I believe, all white women in a hospital. Like, it's just, so it's crazy to begin with, but it seems to assume that the body is simply a machine that's going to like function in a mechanistic way. And then if it's not, then something's a problem instead of, so it ends up like making the body seem like just a pathological thing if it doesn't work that way. Yeah. And it isn't wrong. Like, most times, even like pauses in labor are purposeful. They have some function that they're accomplishing, whether that's to allow you to rest or allow your baby to shift position or allow like your tissues to catch up with the dilation. Like, you can almost always trust that there's some reason. And I think that even just when I think about choosing to see that as the default, like, my body's irregular pattern here, or this pause in my labor, instead of assuming it means something's wrong, assuming it means your body's doing something good for you, in and of itself is probably going to help your labor progress.
Right.
Because the minute you label it as like, something's not working, something's wrong, you're getting into that fear and adrenaline state that then will even further cut down the process.
And even if you're not afraid, you're in the neocortex. You're trying to measure something.
Figure it out.
You're supposed to be in this deeper brain wave state, right? Like, and if you are trying to analyze your own birth and you're trying to like figure out what's happening and why it's happening, your body's not going to be in the labor pattern of like the labor flow, right? Like that flow, rather a pattern. Like, that's what we really need to be calling it, is this labor flow, because the river doesn't flow it's not a channel. It's not a pipe that the water just flows through it, right? Like, it is a river, and there are rocks and sticks and beaver dams and all the things, and it will flow through, but we have to just ride that and surrender to that. And then as like a midwife or, a provider, we're the ones in the frontal cortex, but there has to be this trust of the design that, and if you're coming at it from a philosophy that the body can heal itself, that it wisely compensates, that it's doing something that you don't understand, like, can you have the humility to ask the questions and learn something new from this mom and this labor and this baby? Or do you believe that you know all the things? Because I know for me, the more I learn, the more I realize I know nothing. It is birth. It will humble you so fast if you don't humble yourself. And so, I don't know. I just think that I was once doing, as a student, I was doing a kind of a paper on this, like, can mystery be measured? And in the process of that, I met up with someone who is now my dear friend to interview her. And this was how I met Cindy Morrow. And I interviewed her on a story she had shared on a cord labor. Had these funky cord labor pattern and the really cool story she had on that. And so I interviewed her and we went through a few different stories and just some of her experience and some more in-depth on her thoughts on that particular labor. Maybe we can get her on here to share that story.
Yes, I love her.
But she said this quote, and I wrote it down at the time. She said the pattern was that there was no pattern except what was individual to each woman. And yes, yes, that's all that needs to be said. There was no pattern except what was individual to each woman. That is the mystery. And so there may be a flow that eventually gets this baby to be aligned and rotate well and come out, down and out. But it doesn't have to fit. Like, nobody uploaded a program to you to tell you, like, this needs to be done in this order. There's so much more than just dilation. And that's why our vaginal exams very rarely are necessary or tell us much. And if they do, like, if I'm doing a vaginal exam, it is not because I care about dilation. It's because I care about, am I feeling an asympathetic head? Like, what suture lines am I feeling on this baby's head? Like, how are they positioned? How far down are they descending? Is there some tightness in her vaginal walls that needs to be released? Is there some tension there that's causing kind of like a trampoline versus like being able to be loose and letting this baby out? I'm assessing a lot more. I could care less what the dilation is. It's very much one little piece of the puzzle, and it's not even like a cornerstone to me. It's just like, it's not. You can be 5 centimeters and have a baby weeks later, or 5 centimeters and have a baby in the next 10 minutes. Like, it does not really give us a picture. It's not telling us when or how long. It can't measure anything. So it just tells us what your cervix is at that very second that my hand was measuring it. And it might change the moment I exit because there was a hand in there that wasn't designed to be there. So that's a whole other, piece of this is we're measuring a labor pattern by this very arbitrary, I don't even up there with a ruler. Okay. Like, why do we say that all women get to 10 centimeters, but we all have different heights and weights and, hip bone sizes and wrist sizes, but everybody's cervix gets to 10? No, how we just, if you put your fingers out, I wish we had video, but like, everybody, we're measuring with our fingers.
It's not very precise, really.
Pretty
subjective.
Each person kind of like, I have to, like, when I was learning, it's this training my hand to know what 10 centimeters is when I hold out my hands, but it's just such this very subjective muscle memory thing. And like, what I might call 5 centimeters, the next person might call 7 or might call 4. And, it's not really helpful unless you're having the same person measuring it. And then again, is that causing tension? Is your cervix kind of closing up a little bit when I'm checking? Like, that's a possibility. So like, I'm more like, if I'm having to check, it's largely because a mom asked me to, or because there is something off and we're trying to figure out, we need more pieces to this puzzle to find out what's going on. Is this baby asynclitic? Is this baby descending? Is there tight tissue? Is there, is your cervix supple? Or is it like rigid? Like, is there some tension happening here? There's a lot more questions that we should be asking with a vaginal exam if we have gotten to the point of vaginal exam. But like, to determine what a labor pattern is by this arbitrary guesstimated centimeter measurement as if I went up there with a tape measure to measure it out, to know that you absolutely were 9 3/4 centimeter or whatever. Like, why have we gotten that we can measure? Because we can measure a cervix. What else can we not measure? Like, we're still learning things about our anatomy, still to this day. Like, they found a whole organ in our entire body recently that we didn't know about. Like,
what?
Oh yeah, that's a whole other thing. But,
you know what I'll be Googling later.
Yeah. Okay. But we still don't know. There's so much we don't know. What about the labor process that have we not discovered? That we look at it like we actually know all the things.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know anything.
Nope.
We don't know anything.
Yeah, so. That's like from the like childbirth education perspective. I'm so often like, okay, know this stuff, but like really the best thing that you can practice and learn and live into is surrender and trust, because none of it is a given. Mm-hmm. Literally none. Like I'm always saying, birth is inherently unpredictable. Like it will never not be unpredictable. So what skill set do you need to navigate an inherently unpredictable event? You need trust and surrender. You don't need like quantification and measurement and like what to expect when you're expecting, or like birth in 5 easy steps. Nope. Those tools are going to fail you. They're not going to hold water. They're not going to carry you through this.
Yeah. Yeah. I always teach, like, how do we view, like progress, quote unquote, that we're moving forward, like the river is flowing, by sight and sound and experience and feeling like the atmosphere of the room, right? Like and then obviously being in a state of prayer, but like I've got like a little quote, a chart, as much as we can chart this, that really talks about like the sights and sounds. Like, what do you hear? What do you see? What do you observe on the outside of her going deeper? What does that actually look like? Like, if she's up and chatting, and even this breaks down.
Yep.
Break down, because I have seen the chatty woman have a baby 10 minutes later. But most, there's this kind of like idea of, if she's going deeper into those lower brain waves, then there's outward signs that she's not present in her cortex, right? Like there's those signs of her going deeper. And what does that look like? Does her sounds, like she's gone from chatty to kind of more inward to kind of like these primal sounds, right? Or she's kind of standing up and she's clothed and she's still worried about the external things of who has the kids and has everybody eaten, and whether I should bother my midwife with updates or if that's bothersome to her. And, she's still concerned about the outward world, right? And then she slowly moves into, that sound bothers me, stop it, to like, I need to go away to my, like all of a sudden she's not caring about whether she's inconveniencing other people. And it's this, I need to go and hide in my cave, or you need to stop talking, or I need you to not smell that way.
Or I don't care if I'm naked in front of you anymore.
I don't care if I'm naked anymore. You're shedding your clothing. There's this deeper, like there's a deeper internal where there's a focus on just her and this baby. And then there's the deeper, like you see her even going down, like the whole presence, like she's walking around to like, now we're getting lower to the floor and we're getting, we're squatting or we're on our hands and knees, or there's this, like she's standing and coming down, or she's just, or side lying and she's like, needs to be lower. Like, and you see it with her head, and she's tipping her head and her eyes are closing and her, just everything is moving downward. And so it's kind of like, is the energy high or is the energy low? Is the body high up off the ground? Like, are we walking and talking and, all of the, like, her eyes are open and her head is up? Or is she coming in and closing in around herself and coming lower to the ground and really feeling out this baby coming? Like, you can see this pattern. And I can honestly guesstimate where she's at from those, as far as like, how far we are from baby arriving.
Are you a Jesus-loving woman who feels called to serve birthing mothers, but feels overwhelmed by the secular New Age ideologies in the birth world? You sense the holy tug to be a birthkeeper, doula, or traditional midwife, but it feels impossible to find training that honors both your faith and autonomous birth.
Allow us to introduce you to Hearthmother Journey. This isn't just another birth worker training. It's a transformative journey that will ground your birth ministry in biblical wisdom, equip you with a Christ-centered methodology of traditional, undisturbed birth practices, transform you into the wise guide God is calling you to be, expand the depth and breadth of your understanding of physiological pregnancy, birth, and postpartum.
Join the rising of the modern Hearthmother, centered on God's holy hearth, serving as his handmaiden, carrying the sacred fire of wisdom and truth.
We're on a mission to raise up the next generation of holy wild birth keepers. Will you be one of them? Click the link in the show notes to take the next step into your calling.
I love the way you explained that, because I was going to just say a minute ago, like, let's talk about then if we're not going to assess labor progress by minutes.
Yeah.
And like how long contractions last or cervical dilation, how do we assess it? And these are the ways, right? These like external cues about what's going on internally, which may or may not line up with how far apart the contractions are and how long they're lasting.
Right.
Like, I'm thinking of another friend's birth where she had all those symptoms, those signs you were just talking about, but her contractions were still 10 to 15 minutes apart.
Mm-hmm.
And they never really got closer until she was pushing her baby out. So, yeah, it may or may not line up.
Yeah.
But I think it's more reliable, ultimately, the things that you're talking about, than the contraction patterns.
Yeah. It's like assessing how far down the river she is by, like, where is she in? Is she gone to labor land yet? Like, has she arrived, right? Like, is she in that space where things can flow, or are we still kind of tiptoeing around the shallows still? You know, that's where you try to, that's how I would assess, put progress. And I can put the chart that I've created. I can probably put that in the show notes, or maybe I can put it up on the Instagram and we can make that post.
It's a great idea.
Because it's just I think it also helps the outsider, because really I don't want the birthing mom assessing her progress.
Right.
That's such a masculine measurement thing. Like, we can't measure this mystery. Stop trying to measure it within yourself, because that you're immediately pulling yourself out. Like, like you're just immediately pulling yourself out. And so, don't assess your progress, but like, for the husband, for the doula, the birth keeper, the midwife, the people who are there to be in their frontal cortex, then, like, how are you measuring it? This is how we can look at progress and see what is the body actually doing and where is she at? Like, is she going deeper? And Wapio's holistic labor stages really talk about that too, like that going deeper into the brainwave states, and how you can view that, right? Like, you can see just as much as we can walk into a room that you've not been in, and there was just an exciting announcement. Something happened. You don't know what happened, and you don't know what, but you know that you feel excited about this anticipation of like, what happened? Tell me. Like, or you hear your husband on the phone and you're only getting one side of the conversation, and it's like, what's going on? Like, is everybody okay? Like, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? What's happening? Like, you don't have all the information, but you can feel that. Like, that's what I mean when I
energetically
something, right? Like, it's like there's this tension, or there's this excitement, or there's this, oh, there was just a fight in this room and I just stepped into something I wasn't supposed to step into, or I just stepped in on a conversation that was actually just meant for these two people and I'm now intruding. Like you can have that awareness to feel and see and observe the body language and the energy around, just that atmosphere. And so if we can do that in all these other situations, you can come and bring that same muscle and observe what's going on. And I would even say that even sometimes that chatty mom, there's still something that you can observe of like, okay, there's something shifting here. I don't know. It's not the normal, like she's still chatting, but she's pushing. I just saw that. Like I just saw that there's this grunt. There's this like, okay, this child, she's going to laugh this baby out. Alrighty then. Like great for her, but
or conversely, the mom who's super quiet. I was just at one this week where she was probably literally the quietest birther I've ever been in the presence of. Yeah. And there was very few external cues, unless you were really watching, like almost like watching the way her muscles tightened in her abdomen and like listening to the faintest little grunt sound. Yeah. It's more like an energetic assessment than
And I think that if we are trying to see those things, like we have to be quiet. We have to be paying attention and measuring, not numbers, like, cause that didn't come out with a number, right? Like that doesn't, there's no way to say she grunted on a scale of 1 to like what, like that but there is that tonality of like, oh, that was a pushy grunt versus, she's moaning about the pain, right? Like there's just this quality and tonality of things that if you are attuning yourself to the situation and, there's a lot of talk in like the psychological world of like attunement and attachment and how we can attune to one another. And if you're doing that, I feel like you will see that progress happen. You will know that this is moving in the right direction. And you will also know when there's something off because moms know when something's off. They always know. Almost always. If they're, if there's not enough trauma that kind of blocks them away from being able to know, right? Like sometimes if there's too much trauma in their life, that might be an indicator or if they've had habitually turned their intuition off, where they've not been allowed to be in tune, then maybe that won't hold water. Because again, this is not black and white, but for the most part, women know when something's off and they might not know what it is, but I'll never forget when I heard a woman say, am I going to die? In the most like calm, just matter of fact, like when I heard it, I was like, oh, there's something off. Because it wasn't like the pain. She thought she was going to die. Like it's too intense and I can't handle it. It was just this like very straightforward matter of fact, like I'm going to die, aren't I? And we were like, nope, we're going to call the EMTs. We're not, like there was something in her that knew something was not right. And she was right. Something was not right. And it quickly manifested right after that. Like we quickly saw the problem and we got her to the hospital and everything ended up being great. She's alive and well and so is her baby. But there was a real problem there. And so, and not to go into her story, like that is the story I want to take away is that she did know that there was something off and her voicing it and us going, because we could have been like, no, you're fine. That's, like you're okay. No, we heard and we were automatically even more prepared than for what was coming 10 minutes later when that emergency arose.
Wow. That's amazing.
And so it's like, they know, they will know internally something's not right. I don't feel the baby's not coming down right. There's this anxiousness or this matter of fact, there's something off. I don't know what it is, and midwives will have it too. I can't tell you how many times I've heard the story of like, I don't know, we just need to go in. And then the emergency happens when they've transferred, or, those kinds of the intuitive side of looking at the pattern and the progress and knowing whether something is interrupting it or not.
Yeah. It strikes me as we're talking, and I'd never really quite thought about this in quite this way before, but like both mothers coming into their births need to be willing to engage that space with a different part of themselves than their thinking brain. It needs to be like, they need to bring that intuitive and primal part of themselves, but also the birth attendants.
Yeah.
Like the birth attendants can afford and need to have some of their thinking limbic brain on, but they also need to bring in their intuition and their sense of things in the spiritual realm and energetically. You can't, as a mother or as a birth attendant, you can't navigate a labor and a birth exclusively from that kind of like masculine, higher thinking brain.
Yes.
I mean, when you try, that's when you end up doing harm.
Right. We talk about, we can attune to her and see what she's doing and really, but like, we have to remember she's going to attune to us. You know, like that's what we do when we get in a room with somebody, especially in a situation where it is such this intimate and that's what happens in a birth. But if she's attuning to us and we are so much measuring and voicing and telling her what's happening and what's, you know, like all of this, like very masculine measurement of like, she's going to attune to that. And then she's going to come up into like, it's that like the measuring of contractions and like making sure she feels observed. Like if that's what's happening, like I'm not talking about like not informing her of things she needs to be informed of, but like if we're like, yep, that's in a contraction. Oh, you're about to have a contraction. Yeah. Let me know. Thank you. Yeah. Like I have seen that happen, you know, like that has happened to me even in my own birth. Like, oh, you're about to have a contraction. Like, okay, thank you. Like, you know, like it's just such a weird thing when we've got our monitors and we've got our measurements and our, you know, our contraction apps and all the things. And it's like, don't measure yourself and don't openly observe and measure her and voice all of that so that she feels that and you're pulling her out of her labor.
Yeah. You don't need to do a like running commentary and analysis on her birth out loud.
Loud for her. Like she's going to attune to you. And so it's learning how to, you know, view and observe and assess while being quiet and while, you know, being enough. We've had this conversation with like charting around it. Like, does the charting pull you out of that space? Like, can you quickly note it? Or are you like over there writing the book and you need to do that there? But then it's like, that has you know, energy to it, right? Like there's this like, you bring when you're like, every time you look at her, you write something down. Like how self-conscious would that make you? You know, like just like, how do you go about charting? How you go about being present in that space?
Especially when all this stuff the chart is asking for is so quantitative.
Right.
And I always found that hard when I was apprenticing. Like the charting process felt so disruptive to my ability to just sit and be with.
Right.
And feel like things out.
Pattern out. And like making her feel like it's being measured.
Yeah.
That has an effect. So all of that, I don't know. I think we could dance around some of this, but it just feels very much like it all boils back down to we are not robots and you cannot measure mystery. There is not a, you know, true pattern that every woman has to follow. And so I think there's some practical things that we can look at, like the, you know, the sights and the sounds and, you know, and then like really coming into how we sit with a woman, and, you know, or as the birthing mom, how we allow ourselves to not measure ourselves, but to just be in the process and get into that internal space. But really it's like, okay, Lord, where do we need to be? And is this progressing towards, like, why do we even have to ask that question, I guess, is really what it comes down to. Like, why are we asking, is this labor pattern? I feel like there's some practicalities around like, okay, if you're not a home birther and you're trying to figure out when to go to the hospital, or
if you are a home birther and you want to know when to call in your team,
try to call in your team.
Yeah.
When you're trying to send the kids off to the babysitter, like all of these kinds of, why are we asking the question is really what it comes down to, I guess. Because I always want okay, what's the point? Why are we asking? What do we need? And what we're needing is to make a decision. And so you're trying to, from a very masculine standpoint, put all the pieces together to kind of make that right decision. And so in that space, I feel like if you're already trying to ask this question, is this labor? This feels like labor. I'm pretty sure it's labor. And just move with that. As a birth worker, we expect to be called. We are on call. We are on, that's what our job is. You are paying us to be on call for you. So
you are not annoying us.
You're not annoying me to call me and say, hey, I think this is labor. I'm not sure if it is, and there's a whole myriad of ways, but I can hear a woman and go, oh yeah, I feel like that, this is labor. Maybe you're not quite ready for me, but I can hear a woman and it'll tell me and then my own intuition and my own Holy Spirit, speaking to me saying, yep, this is labor. You need to be prepared and ready to go.
Yeah.
So many times does that happen. And so to answer the question, what else can we go by than the pattern? Because if the pattern is not accurate and the pattern isn't actually giving us the real answer to the question, then what else are we going by? Well, your intuition. What do you think you're in labor? Then you probably are. And
I think it's helpful to teach dads a little bit about the sight and sound stuff that you were talking about. Often it's the dads who end up making the call. I think it's really time for you to come now,
Yeah, if dad calls me, I'm in the car.
And that was true for my last birth too. I was like, no, I'm good. And then my husband was like, nope, you're not. I'm going to call people. He didn't tell me that. He just went ahead and did it.
Yeah. If dad calls me, we're having a baby. That's pretty much pretty accurate. So, yeah, I think it's how is it actually helpful to ask this pattern? And what other questions can we be asking? What other evidence can we?
What are better questions?
We need better questions. We need better, factors to be measuring that, and not measuring, but taking into account would be a good word. The mental state, the emotional state, the brainwave, where is she at? Where is she present? Is it continuing on? How, all of those things, but the thing I want the birthing mom to know is that you shouldn't have to measure all of that. You shouldn't have to come up with whether you're progressing or not. And if you're trying to make that decision to call your midwife and you're kind of feeling I always tell her, if you feel like you want to tell your best friend, or if you would tell your husband what's going on about this, because you think hey, maybe you shouldn't go to work. I don't know if I am or not, but I kind of want you close. Then call me. Just let me know. If you feel the need to tell your very best friend, if you are telling your husband, I just need you closer, I just need that doesn't mean I'm going to come over, but let me know. And then you've got the other people who are also praying and also leaning into their intuition and also kind of doing the measuring that you don't need to be measuring, because you it's going to pull you out of your pattern, your flow.
That's a good measuring stick. I like that. If you tell your husband, also communicate it to your birth attendants. I also know for a lot of women, sometimes having an unassisted birth feels like another way around this problem, because there isn't a person to notify. You can truly just enter into your flow and let it be what it's going to be and unfold how it's going to unfold. And that alone can kind of get you out of the assessment status
for it when there's not.
You're not going anywhere. No one's coming to you. You're just going to have your baby.
Kids somewhere, if the kids are old enough and they're just going to be down the hall or whatever, those it removes the question altogether, which then goes like, the problem is not whether you are in a labor pattern. The problem is, why do we have to ask this question?
Yeah.
And then how can we ask a better question to actually support this flow?
Mm-hmm. Yep. So many good things to consider. Yeah.
Oh, I feel like that's a good place to land.
I agree.
Well, it was a wonderful discussion. I hope that this was helpful for the birthing mamas and the dads and the birth workers out there listening. I guess I'll just pray us out and
Please.
land. All right. Jesus, we just thank you. I thank you that you are the great designer, Yahweh. I thank you that you created us individually. You created us uniquely, and that each baby, each birth is as unique as that baby. And I thank you that we don't have to attempt to measure out. I often think of how you spoke to Job, saying, like, do you know when the deer will give birth? And Lord, we don't. We don't know when we will give birth. We don't know when and how this labor will progress. And we thank you that we don't have to, that your ways are higher than ours. So I just ask for a peace to rest in the labor flow, that we can just trust your design and trust that you will let us know if there is something to bring intervention, and when there's just the ability to ride and rest with you. And so right now we just pray for a holy wild birth experience for all of our listeners, that it would be anointed with your hand and your presence, that they would be able to just relax and ride that flow with you, Lord. We just thank you for it. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Go in peace and have a holy wild birth.
Love that benediction.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of Holy Wild Birth. We hope that you were genuinely encouraged, inspired, and challenged by what you heard today. If you're loving what you hear, please make sure that you share it. Leave reviews. That helps other mamas find this content as well. And don't forget to read the show notes, okay? Because that's where you can find our email address if you want to reach out to us and start a conversation. It's also where you'll find free offerings as well as invitations to work with me and or Lauren. We can't wait to get to know you. See you next week.